It was a valiant effort, and I'll accept it. With no V and no Goblin Katie here, somebody had to fill in with giggling as we come into the stream. Hey, Internet!
It was either giggling or singing. I chose giggling.
I think it was a good choice.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Internets, it's Jake from Mini Terrain Domain, and this is the Dawnbringers Retrospective Q&A. We are done with Season 5 of the Dawnbringers. So, if you haven't seen that, or you want to avoid spoilers, you definitely don't want to watch tonight. Excuse me. But if you want to get caught up, all VODs... the last finale, it's not up yet, but it will be by this weekend. And then all 5 seasons of Dawnbringers are available on youtube.com/Mini Terrain Domain. We're going to get started in just a moment with a retrospective look at the Dawnbringers, looking ahead and chatting with our players and myself and you, the audience, if you have questions, things like that. Looks like I already caught one. I owe you another domain die because the Big Bearded Nerd crew looks like they raided us as well. Just a shout out to Big Bearded Nerd 21. Follow them if you're not doing so. It is an MTD channel, but also they are just finished the first leg of a 3-leg charity event this weekend benefiting Planned Parenthood. Today was miniature painting and hanging out. Tomorrow is going to be a West Ocalypse game. Check out Big Bearded Nerd on Twitter to get the information on that. Or Cole, you might be able to put the link in the chat for that as well. But I missed another one. While I was talking, we're like rating and subbing and all that stuff. But anyway, the second part of that's going to be on Friday night, and then on Saturday night, I will be running a game called Misfits of the Multiverse Volume 1 over on Big Bearded Nerd 21, and it is going to be wild, wacky, zany. And we will be taking donations for incentives like voices and voice mods and accents and advantages and disadvantages, all that good stuff. So tune in and check that out. Be a part of the awesomeness. Also happening tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern over on Nerdarchy Live. I will be over there along with the rest of the crew, minus V, for our Untraditionally Arcane monthly game over there with Ted as our DM. And then speaking of Big Bearded Nerd, I believe next week, Wednesday. Is it Wednesday or Tuesday? I don't remember. Or it's not next week, is it? It's next month. Em's like, I'm not ready next week. We have a monthly Mythos game. We started a new Mythos campaign just a few weeks ago over there. Our Call of Cthulhu. And M is our new keeper for this new series called Silent Sky. Is that right? No. Yes.
Yeah, Silent Sky.
Silent Sky. And speaking of domain tomes, domain dice, Joey P jumping in, good old Chameleon fam hitting us with another 20 domain dice for you fellows, you fellow Dawnbringers. Completely replenishing your pool pretty much that you spent in the finale, getting you ready for season 6. So there's a lot of good stuff I just announced. Be sure to check out our sponsors, Talon and Claw at exclamation point MTD Claw. Head over there, get yourself some cool dice accessories like vaults, such as this lovely wooden one. My dice are out of it because they're in my tray. This is the Aromatic Cedar. It's my favorite, next to my Whiskey Barrel dice vault from the Kickstarter. I also have one of their DM screens. They make lots of great stuff. Use code MTDClaw at checkout to get 10% off of your order. Also check out part of the IHOM crew, Keel, over at Run Right Play, exclamation point RWP. check out the Patreon. It's an amazing community of collaboration going on over there. You definitely want to be a part of that. I don't back a lot of Patreons, but I back Run Right Play. It's a pretty awesome place. So check that out. And then, yeah, the last thing I want to talk about, I mean, we're not necessarily rolling dice tonight, but it's still just as important as your mental health. We talk about it all the time because it is so important that that you know that you matter. You make a difference. Your presence on this earth makes a difference. You can be struggling for any number of reasons. It doesn't matter why you're struggling. You need to first know it's okay. It's okay to not be okay. But you don't have to struggle alone. Jeremy has already put the link in the chat. It will periodically appear there. If you are struggling and you're not sure where to turn to get help, but you know you want to get help, !help in the chat will bring up that URL for findayhelpline.com. Go there now, bookmark it, save it for yourself, save it for a friend. It is so easy to use. You just put where you are located in the world, and they will provide you with a list of resources for any number of mental health and services you might need help with. Please do check it out. Even if you are perfectly fine and okay, go check it out anyway to see what kind of services are available, so you know if somebody that you know is struggling, that's the right place, the right thing for them. So check that out. Okay. This tonight is just going to be, well, first off, in the chat, feel free to throw questions at us. It's best if you preface it in chat with the in all capital letters, just the word question, and then your question, so we can keep an eye on those. And Jeremy, I know you're in chat. Would you mind keeping an eye on those for me as well? So yeah, if you have questions for us, we're going to be talking about this season. We're going to be talking about previous seasons. And we're going to be taking a look at the future of the Dawnbringers. What does next season bring? It's pretty informal. But yeah, so let's get started. And I'm going to throw it to, we've got Dan, we've got M, we've got Ted, and we've got Jeremy with us tonight. Let's start off with, we just wrapped our longest season, 3 times longer than our first season. It was 36 sessions, and we played for 1 week and 1 day shy of a year in this particular season. Let's just go around the horn, and I'll start with you, Jeremy. What was something that really stood out to you from season 5, Ram of the Frost Maiden? Like a favorite moment, least favorite, whatever. Just if you had to pick a moment, what was it?
I think with this season, the thing that I felt a lot stronger was an interaction with more NPCs. Most of the NPCs from the previous seasons we've had mainly as adversaries, which is always fun, to have scenes with adversaries and stuff. But this one, we definitely got to have kind of established NPCs that we saw on multiple occasions and got to kind of build a rapport with. And that was really nice, especially Nimsy Huddle and her tarts, because that's an obvious answer for me. So
Nimsy was great, but I actually liked the fact that there was, the whole thing with Baron and with Vi. Like, I never really
that was cool too.
I didn't know Vi, and I vaguely interacted with Baron, but like that whole thing, like I thought there was a lot of kind of like, all right, we need to keep touching base with everybody, because legitimately Vi was a friend to you guys. You adventured together. And then there was the whole fact that, Vi was M's previous PC. So like making sure that not Fig, but M was okay with going down that path, because I'm sure there's got to be some emotional connection there too. So
yeah. And we can elaborate on that a little bit more now or later, but I absolutely, when I had the idea I absolutely talked quite a bit with M. M and I spoke about it because first off, I just straight up said, here's kind of the general idea of what I want to do. I want to take Vi and I want to make Vi evil. How do you feel about that? And M was like, here's my character sheet.
I was going to say, knowing M as well as I do, I imagine that they were perfectly okay with it.
Instantly, just like, yeah, okay, that's great. I love that.
and that was one of those things too that it kind of came about because Vi was a character that M played for the 12 episodes of the first season. What wound up being our first season, The Sunless Citadel. Vi was an older, if I remember correctly, late 40s, early 50s human druid that kind of lived on the outskirts of Oakhurst, the starting location. And I wound up using Belak, the druid that's the bad guy in that. I tied it to Vi's story that Belak was Vi's estranged brother. And because of the way that season played out, M came to me and said, hey, I really think Vi's story is done. Which is kind of a weird thing to hear in what was the first season of an arc of a campaign, but it made sense. And I just thought, okay, Vi's just done. You know, Vi's a character that maybe if you ever go back, you might run into. And then the opportunity was there within Rime of the Frostmaiden. I saw places where I could use this character. But how did you feel about the portrayal or the way Vi turned, and ultimately for your characters to have to? Now you got lucky. You didn't have to yourself face the character because you were gone pursuing some real life adventures. But ultimately, how did you feel about that?
I thought it was interesting because I think when I came to with Vi's original like backstory, like it's a horrific story of what Vi went through, and what she did was horrific, and I never imagined that maybe she would turn out to like go down that path, but as soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Especially I felt that she would be very susceptible to that kind of nudge. Like, I don't think that she would ever go to it on her own, but with the kind of the Chardolin and that kind of stuff, kind of playing with it, she was definitely one to be very affected like that. So I really liked how you put that in, where it wasn't, because I never imagined that she would do that on her own, but how you fit it into the story made a lot of sense to me, and I really liked how you weaved it in. So,
and not knowing for sure how the encounters would go, I had some contingency plans in place. There was a very real possibility that Vi, and ultimately what became you all dubbed Viral, when Auriel and Vi sort of became a combined entity, that they could have gotten away. And so there would have been an opportunity for more encounters at a later time. But Dawnbringers, being who they are going to pursue their enemies to the ends of the earth. So yeah, that was really interesting. Ted, what about you for a moment or favorite moment or scene or character or whatever?
I agree with Jeremy that there was a lot of cool NPC and PC to PC interaction, but I'm totally going to be selfish here, and the crisis of faith and restoration of faith for Thorgarn, saying goodbye to Father Greffin, like that to me was like more emotional than everything else. Because it's like, oh, he's being held here completely because of me. And I'm like, oh, damn, I never thought about that. I thought it was like more along the lines of like the more fatherly-esque mentor wanting to make sure I'm okay and to make sure that I'm going down the path. And I had created the idea, not knowing how much you were going to be okay with me seeing ghosts that aren't really there, and you were totally on board, and I loved it. And then when you throw this in my face of like, yeah, it's your fault, I'm like, oh no. So to me, that was just fabulous. The whole, you know, Ariel trying to be like, it's your fault, and Father Griffin's like, yeah, that's true, and I'm like, damn it.
That's what I love when one of the things I learned early on as a DM is, well, early on as a DM, I was very limiting. It took me a while to get comfortable with even like allowing things from when the Magic the Gathering stuff started coming out, mostly because I didn't know it. And I was afraid to incorporate elements I wasn't familiar with. And I realized it doesn't matter. I don't know any of these characters any more than any other player at the table does, when we're getting into it. So as long as they're within the rule set, and I even allow things, on a one-on-one basis, we sometimes tweak things, reflavor things. I'm really big on allowing you to stay within the boundaries of what the rules set forth, but flavor the presentation of things how you want. But when I got past that, one of the things I learned was when you let your players create the characters they want to create and create the story elements that they want to create, they're more invested in those characters and stories, and two, they invariably and unintentionally, sometimes intentionally, give you so much rope and ammunition by which to use against them. And I've learned to look for those when somebody asks me a question, and I'll just go, yes, absolutely, you can do that thing. You can see ghosts. And it will probably not come back to haunt you in any way.
I didn't consider that a haunt. I thought it was like almost a perfect culmination of that portion of Thorgarn's arc. And like, I, as Ted, was actually emotional because I wasn't prepared. Like, even though it was a role-playing tool for Thorgarn to be like, all right, I'm more comfortable with this spirit that no one else can see than I am with everybody else, because there's an established relationship. And I know that I'm going to look like a fool to turn around and be talking to air. And it's done in, movies and TV shows all the time, where like, oh, there's this character that nobody else can see, but you can. And they look weird when the other people are seeing them talking to nobody. And I'm like, all right, this is fun. I want to play with that. But then it's like, okay, we're saying goodbye. And I'm like, but as much as Thorgarn is ready to move on, Ted wasn't.
Well, and the irony with Thorgarn saying goodbye to Father Griffin is it wasn't there's no vacuum of now you have to deal with there being nobody there, because now you have your own new dark passenger in Archimedes.
Yeah. But and I thought that was like a perfect transition, because like legitimately, I've been kind of toying around for a while, having conversations with several people as to where Thorgarn was going to go class wise. And I'm like, oh, well, this is a great story wise. Archimedes, if Archimedes is going to be there, and it's like, well, I don't think you're disciplined enough. Perhaps we can work on that. So it wound up being this perfect stepping stone to be like, he's used to talking to somebody, so maybe Archimedes is going to talk to him, and that's why he's begun doing this practicing and, what have you. And that's why now he's a first level fighter.
Well, and like going back to what you were saying, Jake, about how players will give you most of the material that you need to royally screw them over, and most of them gladly so, is like, especially good players, they understand that the best role playing, the best moments always arise from conflict in any story. And what you're doing by giving the DM something to specifically to mess with is, I'm giving you permission to mess with my character in a very tailored conflict. like something that is specifically tied into my character or their motivations or their backgrounds or their past. And that's immediately going to draw my character in and give me something to face as a foe. So like, why would you not easily give that information over to your dungeon master as long as you trust them, which obviously we do.
It's automatic character buy-in. It's like,
Exactly.
I've established a plot point or a thread, and I'm okay with this for good or for ill. And then if the party actually cares about the character, then whatever that character cares about, they're going to go along with as well, because my ally, my friend needs help. So when you present those character storylines, boom, it's there. Just the same thing with Brielne. None of us really knew why why Talmud was so fixated on Yesha, but you were on it, so were we.
Before we get too far away from it, one of the interesting things to me about Archimedes for Thorgarn is it calls into question how much he's really let go of Father Greffen, at least not as an individual, but as a presence, because he immediately filled it with a surrogate, right? So he's got a little bit of a morally questionable
Rebound.
Security blanket, a rebound ghost in his head. So that was an interesting juxtaposition.
It's an interesting thing to explore for the character of Thorgarn, because it's something that it's something that, with what Thorgarn realized, that Father Greffen was not just hanging around because he liked Thorgarn. Thorgarn had sort of involuntarily had created this tether. And when he learned that, he very quickly said, okay, I'm going to let you go. Well, and as you said, now he's got this surrogate ghost that's there, and Thorgarn seems to be embracing that. But it definitely brings into question, how much of that is Thorgarn's will being imposed on these incorporeal entities. Definitely something to keep an eye on.
Father Greffen was also interesting because he was an inversion of the usual ghost trope, right? Usually spirits stick around because they have unfinished business or unresolved emotions that they can't let go of, and he was sticking around because he couldn't be let go. So that was cool.
Yeah. Before I go to you, Dan and M, we have a question from Dimension 119. Thank you for the question. The question is, how much is planned and how much is done on the fly? The question was directed at me. So I would say probably 80 to 90%. Well, maybe not that much, because I use modules, so a certain part of it is planned. But I guess I would probably say maybe 60 to 70% then is just on the fly. We have had some of our most powerful scenes that we have had with NPC, PC interactions, things like that have happened. They happened because of something that happened in the moment, or they were a reaction to something that occurred and myself or one of the players latched onto it. A lot of times I pay attention, as any good player and DM at the table should. You should be paying attention to when the players are talking to one another, but also when the characters are, but also when the players are talking to one another and theorizing and things. You kind of get some ideas that maybe you hadn't thought of, but also within the story arcs, things present themselves that every module that I've run and every adventure that we've played, all 5 seasons, have been from published modules from Wizards that I have heavily modified. The first 2 probably followed the closest, Sunless Citadel and the Forge of Fury. But after that, as the characters really started to grow and their stories started to become intertwined, I started developing this sort of narrative that ran through some of these stories that were already tied together, like Sunless Citadel and Forge of Fury with the Ashardalon plotline. And that sort of became a central theme But things like going back to Yesha for a moment. Yesha was this sort of throwaway NPC in the module of Heart of Nightfang Spire. And there was a scene that was completely, I had no idea that, and I believe, I can't even remember now if it was Fig or Thorgarn that initiated it. It may have been, I don't know. It's the Dawnbringers. When you discovered Yesha, you immediately stopped what you were doing, and there was this whole incredible ritual that took place as you all. Now, Talmud. Dang it! I thought I would get through this without doing that. Talmud specifically stayed back, which was really interesting and I think kind of played into this. But there was this whole ritual to heal Yesha because she was essentially just in a vampire pantry waiting to be eaten, very traumatized, and was I believe she was originally in the module described as she's this person that just got caught by the vampires and is a tool to communicate basic information about the vampire spire to the players. And I saw an opportunity that one of the rare times in this campaign that I actually write something out to have something prepped in advance, which was a handout. I believe it's in the Discord, in the Dawnbringers public Discord. It was a page from Yesha's journal that got left behind when drowned involuntarily to escape all of the fire and death, teleported everybody out, but forgot to make sure that Yesha was with them. But when they went back, all that was left was her journal. They found this page that basically she had realized she was living multiple lives, and she had realized that, and she was enumerating these 4 or 5 lives, and the last one was that she was the daughter of a dwarf and her name was Bronley. And you can see that moment when Jeremy saw that, and that's why Talmud's character shifted dramatically into I must protect her at all costs. And whether or not she's the true reincarnation of his daughter Bronley, she became a surrogate daughter. And I love that relationship, and sort of we've kind of put a capstone on it in the last couple episodes. But that's an example of something that was never planned for, but it happened in the moment, and we just went with it. And so much of what I do, I used to brag about being an improvisational low prep DM. And it's not like it's some great accomplishment or anything like that. It's just how my neurodivergent brain works, that I can run a 3-year campaign and never take a note. And I just remember story hooks and plot lines and stuff. But I'm also getting older and I'm writing more and more down. And I've actually, with the other campaign that I run on Monday nights, I deliberately set out and said, I'm going to overcompensate and write everything I can down, because especially when you're running multiple campaigns, it gets harder and harder to keep all your lore straight and stuff. But to get back to it, the answer to your question is a majority of what happens is unplanned for. It's just improvisational stuff. The meat of the adventures are, of course, it's all from pre-published material, so a lot of it's there. And the fact that we were talking beforehand, and I've mentioned it before, I've known since the Sunless Citadel, since we agreed to make this a campaign, I've known what the final arc of this campaign is. I know where we're going. So yeah. I'm gonna swing it over to you, Em. You like Jeremy, you two have been here since the beginning, but you're playing your second character after Vi. What in this campaign or in this last season or whatever, what has stood out to you either about your character or another scene or whatever? What's been a outstanding moment for you?
I think in terms of this module that we did, I really liked. So overall, I really liked the environmental effects. Like traveling was really cool in this one, and normally I'm not a big fan of traveling and stuff like that. It can get kind of tedious, but maybe it's because I'm Canadian. So I was like, I know this. This is like home to me. But I thought that the way it was done was really neat, and you kept it very interesting and very, because it had environmental effects, something that we actually had to care about, or stuff would happen. But the one moment to kind of get on that was when we rolled for the dragon to come just like right away in the forest. But that was the coolest fight, I thought, because you worked in like the blizzard coming in and us not being able to see, and it just really put this very cool image in my mind of us hunting down and trying to fight this dragon that keeps, coming in and out of the blizzard and all of that. So that fight in particular really stands out and just has like a really cool image in my mind.
That was the impetus of the infamous dwarf dimension door drop, or whatever you want to call it. But I actually wanted to, that scene was, there was a point I wanted to make about that for people running games, is that was fairly early in the season. I want to say it was like around episode 10 or something like that. There's a tendency, because I knew going into this season, I knew that Arviatris was the big bad. Arviatris was the one who took the Evangeline. It was Arviatris's horde that was in the Evangeline all along. So I knew this all the way back in season 3. And then in season 10, you rolled, because you were lost, I had you roll on a random survival table, and the dragon came up. And there's this knee-jerk reaction to go, no, it's not time yet. But I decided, we're playing a game, and we agreed on these random rolls. What's the point of rolling randomly if you're going to pull the punch? And then you faced the big bad, and then you killed her. Which was not something I was expecting, but the Dawnbringers, I specifically remember Fig throwing up these walls of force sort of at an angle, creating these invisible ceilings that Arviatris couldn't get out from under right away. And then on a lucky roll of percentile, when Talmud dimension doored 100 feet above in a blizzard in the darkness, and there was a 10% chance that you would be on target, and you rolled within a couple numbers of what you needed to hit that. I specifically remember she only had 7 hit points left of 1,000 hit points, and I was trying to get her out of there so you could face her again later, and then you killed her. And what am I going to take away the fact that you killed the dragon? It was an epic scene, and I just had to start working with the story and things over time to figure out what else was going to happen. A lot of it was driven by where you went and what you did. But you destroyed Arviatris, but you didn't fully eliminate Arviatris.
Well, I'm very thankful that you gave me that moment, Jay. Thank you.
I gave you that moment, and then again, and again,
2-3 times.
And Dan, you came into season 3, The Ghost of Saltmarsh, initially as a guest. We invited you to come play with us for, I think you did 3 or 4 session arc.
I don't even know if it was that long, actually.
Was it that?
I thought it was just one.
Was it just one?
It was just a one shot. They encountered Drown right after the Ham incident. And then at the end of that session...
that's right. It was exactly after the Ham incident.
Yeah. And yeah, there it is.
Ham or die.
And then at the end of that session, it ended with Drown swimming off after the slave ship, right?
Yeah, because that was the Sinister Secrets of Saltmarsh, the only one of all of the adventures in that book that the Dawnbringers actually pursued. Everything else was custom because the way everything played out, and it was no fault of theirs as players or as characters. It was a choice they made when Kelly guested to follow Kelly and send the ship on ahead that caused all this stuff. And then it just turned out that Saltmarsh, nobody likes Saltmarsh. The Dawnbringers do not like Saltmarsh. Saltmarsh did not like the Dawnbringers. But yeah, you were there for that short arc, trying to rescue your friend. And then at a certain point, I think it was I think I was talking with V offline, and I may have chatted with you a couple times, but I know you were wanting to play some more, and we had a few more conversations to see how the logistics would work out for you to be able to play, and yeah. Thankfully it worked out because you've been playing with us since most of, or probably at least half, I'd have to go back and look at what episode you came in on, but at least half of season 3 and all of season 4 and 5, as you've become a Dawnbringer. You're a Dawnbringer when Thorgarn gives you one of the bracers.
I'm really grateful that y'all invited me to play. It was great. Because when the one-shot invite came, I had just fairly recently moved to the Seattle area from Indianapolis. And so I was kind of on a bit of a dry spell of playing games at that time, just with all the chaos of moving. And, I for basically logistical and scheduling reasons, ended the live stream I was running at the time. So it really just big old gap. And so that showed up, and yay.
So what's your moment, Dan, or that stood out for you?
Well, the one I had in mind echoes what Em said. It was the environment, particularly when we first dropped into the mountains of Icewind Dale. The fact that the environment was really our antagonist for the first, really, kind of the first arc of this season. Where it was dealing with the people who weren't resistant to cold, not freezing to death, and making sure we had enough food, and all of that stuff that's usually kind of tedious in role-playing games, but it came front and center in a really compelling way. And it was, I don't know, it was awesome. I love that.
I really appreciate that, because I've only used the environment for a prolonged period as an antagonist twice. M has experienced it both times. With
being the other one,
with Tomb of Annihilation, doing the Chulta personality. M was a part of a 3-year campaign. We went all the way through from cover to cover in that book. Obviously, we didn't touch on every single little side quest and all that, but amazing arcs and everything. And the other extreme, the heat and the need for water. We learned early on in that one that none of us were really in it for a resource management game, but I like in my games, I found that I like doing the random weather rolls, using the 3d20s to determine if the temperature's above, below, or normal. If the wind speed is a factor, and is the precipitation, is it just nothing, or is it like stormy? And then you add in the extreme cold weather and stuff. I really like that aspect of it too, so I'm glad that it came across as well as it did.
On a game running note, I mean, I want to I know I've told you this personally behind the scenes, but just in front of all our friends watching here. You did a fantastic job of scaling this whole hardcover adventure for us, because normally you start at level 1 and you dropped us into Icewind Dale at level 12 or 11 at the time, right?
Yeah.
So, we were tier 3 characters. We have the means to deal with just about everything in that book as it's written. So the fact that we didn't even really have any combat encounters for the first, I don't know, 5 sessions, something like that. I mean, the first thing we fought was the Cold Light Walker, and we had quite a bit going on, and it was really dealing with the cold and surviving. So we were fighting Icewind Dale instead of fighting combat encounters and worrying about which CR is what. And so that was great, really well done.
Thank you. Yeah, we talked about that quite a bit. That basically once we left Saltmarsh, now actually I think Heart of the Nightfang Spire was pretty well scaled for the characters. But yeah, deciding to go into a tier 1 game, tier 1 level 1 game with tier 3 characters is a bold choice. But not only that, the Dawnbringers, we joke about it, but because of the domain dice and having that element of audience participation, the Dawnbringers are essentially Marvel level, Avengers level heroes. You have these moments of danger, but the domain dice mitigate that a lot. You're able to pull off these epic heroic moments, and we're here for it. We all love it, or else if we didn't, we wouldn't have the domain dice and let it be a part of it. But also, you all know when to let those other moments happen. I've seen every single person say, no, I'm not going to use a domain die, or limit themselves and go, okay, I'll roll again. But this time it's going to stay. Yeah, it's been really interesting. And I've, for the most part, for me, scaling encounters, means rethinking how monsters might work. A lot of times I'm just kit bashing monsters, and not even within 5th edition. I've grabbed stuff from one of my favorite tricks. I'm going to give a peek behind the curtain for aspiring DMs, and anybody else. And I think I've told the players this before too, because I pull some of these adventures have come out of 3rd edition, specifically Heart of the Nightfang Spire. A lot of people spend a lot of time worrying about, how do I convert this 3rd edition thing into 5th edition? You don't have to make this spell make sense. If there's a spell that doesn't exist in 5th edition, that's a bigger mystery for the players. Like, how in the heck what was it this thing did? What is this creature that I've never seen before? And you kind of get a sense for how damage should scale, how hit points should scale. You tweak those things, but just read the stat block and figure it out, and just use things as they're written. I don't bother. I haven't converted things for years because of that. Because especially when you have certain players that may have a certain level of inside knowledge on how characters work, it can be difficult to challenge them sometimes. So I like to do that.
It's not difficult to challenge me. It's sometimes difficult to surprise me with what's going on.
Surprise is the thing. The challenge, yeah. But the other thing I do a lot of times is when you have 5 and now 6 heroic, like Marvel superhero type characters, you gotta jack up your damage output, and you gotta jack up your hit points. That's why Arviatris was 1,000 hit points. That's why Arviatris, the Dracolich, and Melthrond, which I forgot to tell you guys, there was a reason I didn't tell you. I'm not going to tell you that. What am I doing? But that's
because
why
they're
they
still out there, man.
That's why they had higher levels of hit points. And I put thought into that. I don't just go, oh, I'm going to give this thing 1,000 hit points. I'm like, okay, this is an epic level fight. It should last a little while. And that's why the Arviatris fight was an entire session.
I mean, one of the best bits of DMing advice I can give anyone is look at how much average damage your party can deal in a round.
Mm-hmm.
Just total it up real quick. Napkin math doesn't have to be exhaustive. And just look at that. Look at the monsters you want to put them up against. Total up all those hit points and divide it by the damage they deal. And that is how many rounds the monsters are going to last. If it's too much, remove. If it's too fast, add, and you'll hit that sweet spot.
And you gotta factor in things like at this level, you all have high spell levels. You have, signature spells like Fig throwing out Figby's hand or a fireball can now be cast at these really high levels. So there's a lot of damage output there. Talmud has a once a day ability that you got to factor in that at least once during that combat, he's going to drop, 8d12, I think?
8d10.
8d10. So there's a pretty high output. And we just learned if he's using that ability and tacking on everything else and doing a super crit, I've got two characters in this game that between the two of them can put out almost 500 points of damage in a single round. And you've got to account for that. So yeah, it's and I've never heard complaints from you guys that, that monster was too hard to kill or whatever. So yeah, it'll be interesting going forward to see what some of the other things, because we're entering, you leveled up to 14 and we're going to be going into season 6, The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, which is another level 1 adventure, but you're going into it at 14th level. But it's also going to be highly customized. Do not expect to see a true representation of The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, because there are major elements from that story that will not make an appearance in our game because of how customized our story is. But I've also got a wonderful surprise that I'm planning on revealing in game in the first one, possibly the first episode. It's really going to depend on the characters. It will most likely appear in the first episode, but I have a surprise I've developed for the characters and the players that is going to have a dramatic impact on season 6. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's all I'm going to say about that. Does anybody have
tease?
Yes. Does anybody have any questions for me? Anything that you wondered about, or that maybe we just didn't touch on it enough? Something you would have liked to have seen more? Anything like that?
I have a question for you as a DM. We've run so many sessions and so many seasons with pretty well all the same characters. How do you pace it so that with the information that the characters give you, like we've had big reveals in this season that even though, we've been playing for all of these sessions, you still managed to bring out people's backstory and make it meaningful and surprising. And so how do you work on pacing that, if that makes sense?
It is a challenge. The biggest thing is that, and this is why, because we didn't initially have this, there was a certain point where I asked all of you to please add your backstories into D&D Beyond. It was when we went full on into D&D Beyond. That I am constantly pulling up your character sheets. And when I think about the game, when I'm thinking about where sometimes it's because things have come out that you've revealed about your character. But for whatever reason, I will just to make sure I haven't missed anything, or if you've added anything, I go and look at everybody's backstories. And if I have questions, I'll just message you and I ask you. So some of I've asked you about things. And then the things I've asked you about then didn't happen for like a season and a half. A lot of it's because we're dealing with a different arc. And it would feel, I sometimes I use movies and television shows, epic TV shows. You think of things like name your favorite TV show over the years, but I would say for me, things like Lost, things like Game of Thrones, those kind of shows where they cover a lot of characters over a long period of time. You can't focus on everybody all at once. You're going to muddy the water, and you're going to take away from somebody's moments. So when I guess it's just being in tune with your characters and your players and the story, and kind of figuring out and realizing, oh, if this were a movie I was watching, I think this is where I would want, it makes sense that we would learn more about Fig. Or, okay, now I see a place in this module that this element, take for example Yesha, where I said, oh, I can use this to really start to draw out Talmud stories, because we're in season 4 and we haven't once really delved into the backstory of Brelne. And that I saw that opportunity, and so I took it. And I think once you're focusing on one or two characters, you really want to be careful that you're not going to pull in additional, unless it makes sense. But again, some of this comes from this is a case where I kind of know what the end game is, and I look for those common story threads that I can drop something that's going to touch on 1, 2, or 3 characters, and I drop it and I let you as characters pick up on that, talk about it, and that sort of tells me, okay, everybody's focusing on Drown right now, or everybody's focusing on Cantriell, so let's dig into that. It's not a hard answer. It's just it comes down to just being aware of what those stories are, which is also why I've started changing more into relying less on my weird neurodivergent memory and actually writing things down to be able to weave those storylines and shift the spotlight around.
Can I tack onto that?
Sure.
So the other thing that I think really is helpful with this particular game is I don't think, despite the intercommunication between the party, I don't think any one of the characters is in the I'm going to tell you everything all at once mindset. I think there's stuff with every single one of these characters that is part of the backstory that hasn't fully, come out yet. Like, there's been, every time the conversation happens, a little bit more gets put out there and a little bit more gets put out there, but not everything. So like, I know that there's some stuff that this character knows and something that this character knows, but it's never been drawn to the light with everybody. It's been mentioned a couple of times about, my character's past love, and a couple people know who Yesha really is, but it hasn't been something where we've sat down as a group and discussed, oh, here's this past, here's this element.
Right.
So I think that's something that I believe we're all veteran players as we come to the table. It's like, if we have an ongoing story, having these puzzle pieces that we can share later on when it's apropos to the moment, I think is really awesome. And like, you do a masterful job of weaving little nuggets in here and there to poke and to prod and to remind. And like, I think it's just fantastic. So not only for the viewers, but the players as well.
I want to get to Dimension 119's question for Jeremy in a moment, but I wanted to touch on a couple things on that real quick. Is one, we early on established in this game, and I've developed this as a DM style, that you can't have I don't want to say it that way, because you can. I don't want to say you can't do something. I chose not to do secret whispers, if you will, or everybody take off your headphones for a moment, or things like that. Even to the point that occasionally I give my players a third person view of what the bad guys are doing or what the good guys are doing or what's happening. We had a recent scene with Baron after, looking back at after Baron fell off the flying fortress. So that for the longest time, Cantriel and Talmud were the only ones that knew about Yesha's true identity. And you as players all had that information because those conversations were happening at the table, all this stuff. But not once did anybody let out information because it's meta knowledge. I've never once worried about my players metagaming and or even doing that thing where it's like, I want to roll an insight and see if I can figure out that some, so that's a huge credit to you as players and why we can do that. That I think really lends to those stories. The second thing, touching on something you said, is in addition to putting something out there that's going to touch on your backstory in a way that's going to inspire you as a character to go, oh, I might know what this is, or I want to talk about this, or I'm going to suddenly get really quiet. One of my favorite things as a DM to do is take something that is a secret the character has that they want to remain secret, and the environment or the bad guy or something exposes that secret to everybody. And now you're forced to deal with that thing. And all you have to do is present it, and you can, just depending on the scene, it's just basically all the characters go, what? And start looking at you. And I had, go ahead.
Just to tag on to that, a long-term campaign that I was running, my wife was playing in, and her character had this really dark, shady backstory. And one of the villains literally just called it out in front of the whole party. And she, as a player, got kind of miffed with me as a dungeon master. She was like, why did you do that? That was my character's secret. And I was like, well, no secret is a good secret unless it's found out. That's the only thing that makes a secret good. So
secrets are meaningless until they affect things. They may as well not exist if it never comes up.
Exactly. If you reach the end of the campaign and it never happened, then it's not a good secret.
There was a game
if
that
the audience didn't see it, it didn't happen.
Right.
There was a game that I'm playing, and we're actually finaleing it on Saturday night. It's an all reptilian setting, so like lizard folk, dragonborn, that kind of stuff. And the one player insisted on being a human, and they were trying to figure out how to make this work. So the DM put humans in as they're the apes in the jungle that don't really have civilized society, and the dragonborn who was a noble, well, the human's going to be your pet, and everybody's going to view it as that and what have you. When we got towards the end of the game, and in the last few sessions, we realized that it wasn't she found the human as a toddler wandering on its own. She snuck away into the jungle and she took it. So we were actually fighting its warlock transformed parent who is just trying to get back his child. And the child doesn't have a relationship with the father. He knows, my sister's character, who, for lack of a better word, is, friend / master. And, it's hysterical to have this whole big, thing. But the reveal happened of my sister's character was a thief. She literally kidnapped the child. And we had to all come to terms of well, how do we deal with that? And it was really, really awesome to see all of that come to be. But if that didn't come out, it's a meaningless story.
One other thing I wanted to mention on the idea of weaving stories in and stuff is you also have to be willing as a dungeon master, but I think also as a player, if you have this idea that you want something to happen, and I don't want to say what it is because there may be opportunities for it later, but for one of your characters, I had from the beginning of season 5, I had an idea of something that would have worked to really tie into a backstory. It would have really brought out some backstory elements there was never an opportunity to make it happen without it feeling 100% forced. And I kept constantly going, okay, well, maybe now they're going to be in this area, or they can do this thing. And you just made choices that were never going to play with that. And anytime I thought, well, okay, I can just make this happen here, I realized, no, it's going to be obvious that I'm shoehorning this in. And so I had to be willing to let that go. There's an entire potential not reveal really, but delving into one of your character's storylines that never happened just because of that. It would have felt forced. There was no natural way to make it happen. And I think I've seen this as a player too. There's times, sometimes within a scene, sometimes within a short arc or a long arc, you want something to happen. But if the storyline isn't supporting that, don't force it. Don't try to shoehorn, especially as a player, because it can be very selfish and spotlight stealing. There were some times with my character of Katya in Jeremy's magnificent long-running Momentum campaign. Some of the best as a player, some of the deepest, most intense role play I've ever done was in that campaign. And there were things that I had chosen for my character that multiple times I wanted to explore, but our choices as a party it would have been counter to that. And as a player, I had to also be willing to go, okay, that's just never going to happen. So I think that's something that as both Dungeon Master and as player, you need to realize you're not going to be able to fit everything in. I mean, the greatest writers leave entire scenes, movie makers, filmmakers leave entire scenes on the cutting room floor because they don't work.
Adversely to that, just to play devil's advocate for a second, sometimes it's really okay to just bring up the meta conversation of, hey, I would really like to do this one thing. I don't know how to do that. Does anybody have any ideas of maybe how we can achieve this scene? Even as a dungeon master, to go to your players and say, I'd really like to have this thing happen in the game. Can anybody think of a way that would be fun and interesting to do? And just to have that frank, open conversation with people. I think there's a lot of groups that I've been in that don't realize that it's okay to have that kind of a discussion outside of the game, where everything doesn't have to be like a secret decision that you're making.
Yeah, it's definitely I guess you just have to establish that with your that kind of communication with your table. I think we do a good job of just having open communication, and definitely. I do it with one
of the best groups.
My Scribe and Scrolls campaign is I ask them repeatedly. We're in the process of pre-recording some content for December because MTD is going to be mostly on hiatus in December. But we're airing, it's a new thing I'm trying called Interludes, where for 5 weeks we're going to air a pre-recorded episode that is one-on-one play between me and one of the other characters. And I asked them in great detail, we've had running conversations. I said, what do you want to explore in your character backstory? So that it's not just me going, okay, surprise, here's what we're going to do. I want to look at the things they want to look at. And so we communicate before we go into the session. And even in our first session we recorded, which will air, I think, the first Monday of December, Carrie and I went into it with a 3-part plan. And partway through, I messaged her in the side chat because we're recording to live. And I said, yeah, we're just going to do this one part because this is awesome. And that's what we did. Because we stayed in communication even while we were playing. Jeremy, Dimension 119 has asked you, how did you feel in the finale when you were nearly dropped? And that's when you were falling from the ceiling, when Arviatris had dropped you. You were 60 feet up, and Arviatris started to basically was hitting you on the way down, and it was only your party members' insistence on the repeated use of domain dice. And if I recall, you actually only made the save you needed to make by one, or your character Talmud was on the verge of dying. How are you feeling in that whole scenario?
So the answer that I can come up with is kind of, I guess, complex. First and foremost, I want to make it very, very clear that neither as a player or as a dungeon master do I fear death for a character. I've had it happen many times before. I've done it many times before to players, characters, and there's always that initial reaction of, oh, fuck, I've drawn this attachment, and a lot of people feel that as a negative thing, but for me, that's a positive. That means that I've invested something in that character and I'm feeling the loss. So that's a good thing for me. But it's in Dungeons and Dragons, especially, death is never the end, or it doesn't have to be. There's so many interesting options that open up in a game like Dungeons and Dragons whenever a character dies. Different planes of existence and gods get involved and magic and all these other kinds of things that can create a really interesting crux or crossroads for your character. So I welcome it, but especially playing a barbarian, I couldn't ask for a better way to go out than a Dracolic literally just hammering me into the ground repeatedly. Like, that's a story I'll tell for years as a player. But discovering that I had that ability, I was like, oh, fuck yes. Like, I can potentially have a Rocky Balboa moment where I'm getting the shit beat out of me, and any normal person would just stay down, either through choice or not. But to be able to continually get back up, I couldn't think of a more Talmud thing. So I was like, this is great. And then to have like the different entities ripped away with each of the successive uses of the ability, like it just built into a moment that I'll cherish for a very long time for Talmud. So yeah, I was thrilled, honestly.
Death is something that I think I have gotten better at dealing it out. I played quite a bit of D&D. I ran quite a bit of D&D before I ever had my first character that I killed, and before I had my first TPK. But once you get that TPK, you're like, oh, that was kind of cool. I want more of those. And it's one of those things that I think the problem is when you have these long running campaigns, at least for me as a DM, is you get so attached to these characters and the storylines. And as a DM, when you're juggling all these storylines, and you can't help but think, but if this character dies, this whole storyline goes away. But guess what? That's what happens in real life. And death is a part of the game. You agree to it. That's the social contract of this game, is your character might die. And there's rules for how to play that out. And like you said, Jeremy, and I always try to remind my players, death does not necessarily mean the end. It doesn't mean your character's done forever. It may. I took a huge lesson from Matt Mercer, thinking of a major character death that happened early in campaign 2 of Critical Role. Or even in past campaigns, whenever there were character deaths, the characters come together and they do these rituals and they appeal to gods and they do everything in their power, and they roll the dice and whatever, and they have success. Okay, we can bring this character back. But Matt always lets the character's player determine, do they actually want to come back? Every player has that choice. They did everything right. If you are a willing participant, your character will come back in. And that's what it boils down to. You leave that agency up to that player. I would never want to force it on somebody. Just going back to Sunless Citadel, when Em said Vi's done, and if I had said, no, I'd really like to see you keep playing Vi, that would have been a real dick move. But
just to emphasize that point, Jake, it's actually baked into the rules that the person being raised from the dead must be willing. Like it's right there in Raised Dead, right? If the creature's soul is both willing and at liberty to rejoin the body. So the person being raised always gets the choice whether or not they want to come back.
Yep. So, I don't see any other questions there. I'm going to shift a little bit. I'm going to open it up. We've been playing this campaign for just over 3 years. Our season finale of Dawnbringers episode 36, the Icewind Scales, was our 114th campaign episode. There were a handful of side quests and things we would do. Used to be when 2 or more people couldn't make it, whoever was available, we would play a side quest or a one shot. But the longer we've played, we've all gone, you know what? I could kind of use a night off. But there's a handful of those episodes. But we've had 114 episodes across the Sunless Citadel, the Forge of Fury, the Ghosts of Saltmarsh, the Heart of the Nightfang Spire, the Rime of the Frost Maiden. Is there anything that anybody, any questions or just anything that you wanted to, moments or anything that stood out for you from the campaign as a whole?
Do you mean questions for you or questions for our fellow players?
Either. I mean, you are free to ask each other questions as well. I can sit here and shut up.
I basically got questions for everybody. I came in case we wanted to fill time and what have you. So I'm going to throw it to M first. With the time away and when Fig was traveling with the other constructs, your essentially your siblings or what have you, even though Fig is a Dawnbringer, do you feel at this moment that you're missing the connection to your fellow construct people or what have you? Because I don't know if Fig really got into too deeply in when you got back about sharing all of that experience. I know you came back with presents and we were all happy to see you, but it was like, oh, you had this whole adventure.
Yeah, I think for Fig, that was a very overwhelming experience for him, I think, just to be able to meet Copernicus, who he thought was gone forever, and to see that there were other constructs beyond Archimedes and what she had created, but actual constructs from Copernicus, and seeing how they're different and seeing that, I do think Fig, and maybe Jake will let me do it, but I think it'd be fun for Fig to speak to them again at some point. Because I think that he does have that connection, and I do think that he sometimes feels a little left out with the Dawnbringers being so human and hungry and being able to eat food and, having these human things. So I feel like that's a good question. And I think that, sometimes Fig has that adventure, but it's something that he's kept close to heart. And I think that it's something that has been special to him, and something that he's done separate from the Dawnbringers, who have done so much for him in terms of his journey. But this has been something that he's done himself, which I think is really special to him.
And that whole side quest was interesting because it came about because you were gone for a period of time in real life. My son, Zach, filled in as a long-term guest, playing Garathan the Githzerai, in the Heart of the Nightfang Spire. And we decided when M came back, we would see where's M been this whole time. So it was really fun to have, taking real world experiences and having to kind of work with the characters and okay, where were they? And I would absolutely be open to in the future potentially exploring more of that. So Ted, I know you've got more questions. We have another question from Dimension 119 too, that specifically for Dan and M. What inspired your character? Did you have a specific thing that made you want to play Drown or Fig? And we'll throw it to you first, Dan.
Yeah. So right about the time I was invited to play and hearing and knowing, because I'd caught a couple episodes of the show, that it was in Saltmarsh. Right around that time, we from Wizards released an Unearthed Arcana with a playtest version of the Lurker in the Deep patron for the Warlock. So I was like, I'm going to play the thing. I want to test it. I want to see how it goes. I had a lot of fun working on it. I want to see how it works out. And so, Ghosts of Saltmarsh, all of Nautical was the perfect place to break it out. And so, Drown was originally a one-shot guest. So that whole thing about making sure we have a backstory in our character sheet, Drown was, okay, I'm going to play a Lurker in the Deep Warlock, which is now called the Fathomless, but then it was the Lurker in the Deep. And, it's like, okay, what playable race do I want to have? And I want to do something that's not, what is the least oceanic thing I can think of? Goliath. I'll play a Goliath Warlock that serves a Leviathan, this elder water primordial deep in the ocean. Why not? And so, and it was that, and it was a hook of you're looking for your friend who's been taken by slavers, make up who they are. and that was the dwarf Valoran. And that was pretty much it. That was the sketch that sort of filled in and became Drown. And that was just, it was just scattered details here and there to put together a reason to play this Warlock. And then when I was invited back, I kind of went, shit, Drown, like I would never have built Drown the way I did, character personality wise, if he was intended to be a long-term play. he's a little flat. but all of that is, built in and has reasons and all that good stuff. But yeah, so that was the impetus. I was invited to play by these lovely people, and I wanted to see how the new Warlock prototype ran.
So if you don't mind, everything in my question kind of relates to what you've just said, and you've shared a little bit. So was it Valoran you said was your friend that you had the backstory? Yeah. You talk about Drown being very flat, and that we'd kind of come out that you were thrown off the cliff. Is there something that holds Drown's emotions back? Or, is part of kind of being thrust into the ocean made you more along the lines of, even keel, and you don't really express emotions anymore?
Short answer is yes. How much do we want to dive in? Like, I'll talk about it if we want to talk about it. Or, Jake, if you have plans for this to come out more directly, we could leave it for that. I don't know. I'm game for whatever. Here's the issue for me. Drown is so frigging taciturn that there's almost no way he's going to volunteer a lot of this, and so it starts getting into that secrets that never come out thing, right?
So I'm going to peel the curtain back just a tiny bit.
It was me that you couldn't find a hook for, was it?
For the life of me, I could not get you guys to go anywhere near the Goliath tribes. And they're nomads. Because when the opportunity was most likely to happen, and I blame myself for this, you stole the freaking flying fortress and flew over all of Icewind Dale. And it was me as a DM getting caught up in the moment that decided this fortress is going to fly. So I hoisted myself by my own petard on that one.
I'll be honest, Jake, I was kind of looking for a reason to go like bump
Well,
into Goliath somewhere.
I was going to say, and that was one of the things, knowing what you knew about the adventure setting and what was going on in there. There's at least 2 primary tribes of Goliaths that are kind of warring, and I had ideas. So there are things with the secret that you're referencing. It goes back to what I said earlier. Sometimes the DM has to just, through external means, the secret gets revealed. And
which you did a great job of a little bit with Aureel, kind of doing the little dream play of watching him being dragged and passed out and thrown off the cliff.
I love using dreams. We've used dream flashback sequences a couple times where they were shared experiences because of the magic involved, which is a great way for other people to see things that you don't want to see. Is through magic, suddenly they can see all this stuff. So,
and Rollo recently just straight up asked Drown, "Hey, where does your magic come from? It's weird." So,
yeah,
you know that
Rollo is the one who has lately been nudging and prying into people's backstories, and like I've tried not to, like I've respected what we've done with this game of not, asking too much or prying too much or oversharing, so that it does have the long reveal. And I'm not gonna step on Katie's toes and whatnot. If that's your character, dude, play it, and I'm there for it, and I'll share whatever. But it's kind of cool, like as Jake says, the stuff is written on my character sheet, and it's like, oh yeah, if there was a character in my backstory that I was in love with, and since Heart of Nightfang Spire, it's kind of been on his mind, and that's why he's been talking to Fig and Rollo, because it's an important thing to him, and she's now died long before I started adventuring with you people, and it kind of got thrust into the forefront.
With Katie playing Rollo and the way she plays Rollo, what's really interesting is you have a very late game introduction of a new character. And we all know Katie was brought in as a summer guest while M was gone for a while, and then we just all love Katie so much we said, hey, do you want to keep playing? But what's great is Rollo is new to the group and is trying to get to know everybody, and so gets to legitimately ask these questions.
Great crowbar.
Yeah, and Katie doesn't have a lot of this knowledge of the campaign and the stories and stuff, so you get these in-character real moments of Rollo being the person Rollo is. Just Rollo will come up to you and go, "Why do you have that scar? Why are you sad about this thing? Or what's going on with you?" So it's really great.
So we meandered away from the question of Drown's sort of laconicness and flat affect. Do you want me to kind of peel back the curtain on that a little bit more, just
as much as you want, knowing that, I mean, we've already talked about how people don't metagame here. Sure. We're gonna eventually, it will be explored, but I mean, it's your character. Right, so reveal as much as you want.
So I can relay it back to a scene that Drown and Talmud had fairly recently, when we were just kind of chilling in Lonelywood, and during the big cookout scene, of potluck scene or whatever it was. At one point, Drown came over and asked Talmud about his rage and his spirits and the way he's sort of taken over and possessed or puppeted by them, and asked specifically about how much he remembers from that time, right? So Drown was exploring that because he saw something that he recognizes. Drown doesn't really remember his past. It's at best like a dream that's fading because you just woke up and in a second the details are going to be gone. And it's just sort of perpetually on that edge. So he can sort of reach back for them, but it's all very hazy and gray and flimsy, and he can't really get a hold of it. And all of that has to do with the curse that was laid on him as punishment. And that was one thing he hinted at with Rollo, is that his people did this thing that they hadn't done in generations. And the fact that they hadn't done it, they forgot why they stopped doing it. And the reason they stopped doing it is because sometimes it would produce a Warlock of the Fathomless. It wouldn't just make their problem go away. It would multiply it many, many times.
Well, that's a really brilliant thing to do as well for keeping your characters past nebulous, you know, for having stepped into the shoes of the character and not having planned for there being much of a backstory. That's a really smart call. That way, as a player, you're not cornered into, you know, decisions that you may not have fully understood whenever you made them and things like that. So now you can kind of change things as you need to, have it be as murky or as clear as, you know, the situation calls for. It
stemmed out of a way for me to reverse engineer a background for Drown, since I was going to play him as an ongoing character. He's got to be more of a person, and he was a little bit of just sort of a cardboard cutout that could stand up for, you know, 1 or 2 sessions, but wouldn't last long term, right? It just, you push him and knock him over, and he's flat, you know. So as time went on, I filled in more of those gaps, but it all centered around who he was has been stripped away from him. His life, his feelings, his thoughts, his dreams, all of that gone. He kind of remembers it. And that's why, here's another thing. In the Feywild, there were those like chalk drawings of everyone's lives, like moments from your lives. And he was sort of looking to see if there was anything of his, and there wasn't. Like he didn't have a past.
So the other thing that's great about having that nebulous past, and as long as you trust your GM, is like, okay, I'm going to insert this memory, and you don't know whether it's legit or not, you know, so you've got these things, and it can be a real mind game because it might be a straight up lie, or it might really be a thing. And if you really have no clue who your character was, it's like, oh, well, was I a good guy? Was I a bad guy? All I remember is, you know, from where I picked up here, and I might now be a different person. And it's a great way to just be able to say, all right, well, maybe you have a shady past, and you met these characters, you worked with them for a while, you did some horrible things. Well, now you go into this town years later, and you're a wanted criminal. You're trying to be a hero. You're trying to do something good. And well, you know what? Now some shit's going to go down. It got real.
It's funny because I have a player in both campaigns. Drown Dan, this backstory or lack of backstory came about because of the way the character was introduced as a one-shot character, whereas in Scribes and Scrolls, Gary deliberately did not give me anything for a backstory. And he's playing a reborn who has no memory of his previous life. And there is a overarching storyline that is starting to emerge, because we're playing Candlekeep Mysteries, which is not a true campaign setting. It's an anthology. It's meant to be adventures meant to be inserted into different things. We said, screw it. We're going to make this a connected campaign. So the characters are really driving those connecting threads. And Gary is 100% on board with me inserting memories and flashbacks, and then he starts to riff off of those. So it's kind of two approaches to the same thing. Limited backstory, trust in your game master, and you just go from there. We do have a couple questions on deck, but I want to finish this question, throwing it over to you, Em, because the question was, how did you come up with the character of Fig, the Clockwork Wizard? What made you want to play this character? And little Dungeon Master note, as I recall, the Warforged was not yet a playable race when you created Fig. You and I worked together to mechanically kind of homebrew something that would work. And very shortly afterwards, Warforged came, and we still worked some of that out. But what made you want to play a Clockwork Wizard?
So I always try to base a lot of my campaign characters, I find, on like things that like I struggle with, like as a person, as a human in the real world. And so I find that it's very helpful for me to do that. And so I took, I don't know, it's just how I was feeling during that time, I guess. I usually have like a lot of anxiety and depersonalization, which can leave me feeling like very alienated from people. And so I wanted to play a character that like felt that, or was that, in the sense that like they didn't understand human emotions or like what people did or how they act in it. And it just allowed me to like, I don't know, just like act like that, you know, as someone who's like learning how to have like compassion and their own emotions and their own like feelings, I guess, that has been, yeah, maybe it sounds a little hooky, but I don't know.
No, it makes sense.
No, that makes a ton of sense.
It makes a lot of sense because we're friends, and I know you on a more personal level than most of our audience does. So I understand that on an even deeper level. I can definitely see where that makes a lot of sense, and it kind of gives an even stronger appreciation for the way you've presented and played Fig.
And then I want to play Wizard because I've never played a Wizard before. So that was just the one that I wanted to play.
I love the way you've blended the elements of the mechanical and the arcane. And Fig has such rich spell descriptions with incorporating the gears, and we've had fun with the name, you know, turning Figby's hand and things like that. I wanted to say, for people familiar with the story and Fig's arc, you named the character Fig, which is short for Figure 2 Prometheus. That name alone was the impetus for what became Copernicus and Archimedes. You had given me the name of Copernicus in your backstory, but Archimedes was an unknown entity to you until she became revealed. And you had found at some point early on I think it was in the Forge of Fury, you had found some drawings, and it had sketches of that said figure 1 Copernicus, figure 2 Prometheus, and figure 3 was scratched out. Or maybe it was the other way around. I don't remember at the moment. I think Archimedes was actually on there and the other one was scratched out. And that was me planting those early seeds for what we would later explore as we delved more into Fig's origins. And another point on that came about, this was a 100% unexpected, improvised, in the moment scene, was when Talmud took Fig to the Raven, that secretive individual on the bridge in Saltmarsh, and that whole scene where the Raven basically showed you how to open up your head, and we revealed that Fig had this gemstone with these orbiting smaller gemstones. 100% improvised in the moment, because you made a choice to go in that location, in that direction and location, and I was just like, what? I don't know. What are we gonna do? Okay, and so everything about that was all of us together making something whole cloth, brand new, and it became such an integral part, and is even now playing a part in Thorgarn's existence because of becoming attuned. When you left, you know, we had Fig's head. I had Fig's head get disintegrated, and Thorgarn was the one that found Fig's body and the gemstones and picked him up. And as a way of keeping Fig there, he attuned to him and then gave you back your brain, as it were. But kept Archimedes, and that's created this interesting scenario. And it was all born from this amazing opportunity of the three of us sort of creating this scene out of nothing.
I guess that moment just goes to show how stupid Thorgarn actually is. If having Fig's brain inside of his only makes him 2 points smarter.
So we do have a couple other questions. Tamiko wants to know, Jeremy. We always start the show, end, and come back from breaks with either Jeremy, V, or both. And now Goblin Katie is a big part of that as well. Laughing their asses off. Spill the tea. What was your favorite thing that was said during the transitions that got you good? I don't know if you can say that.
Can you remember specific ones?
I can't.
So
actually.
in the moment.
So many.
It
penises.
really is. There's a lot of
Lot
a lot of
jokes.
the things that I wouldn't be able to even talk about. But yeah, it's the things that get said that catch me off guard. That because I have a very dirty sense of humor. Anybody who knows me for any length of time figures that out very, very quickly. I don't have much of a filter at all. And none of it is meant in any kind of harm or offense to anybody. It's just who I am. And you either like it or you don't, typically. And I happen to have found a group of people that not only like it, but they can keep pace, which is really awesome.
One specific thing that I remember was from the other stream you were running with like V and Dr. B and Katie, Jake, was there was a Bush comment that kept popping back up. That one was a source of going live giggles for like a month.
Yep.
So I think
the one thing that I will say that I can remember specifically is the charity event that we ran. I think the last charity event that we ran, when I was warned to keep it clean, and then everybody else went off the fucking rails.
That whole session was just one big dick joke. One big Saxon
college
dick
of the back door.
It was mostly a butt stuff joke.
Yeah,
yes.
College of the back alley or something. I was like, oh my god.
So I would say like the fact that this has been going on for so long, and like we're aware of like, all right, how long does it take? When is it about to happen? So like it might not be the same person every time, but somebody sees the transition about to happen, and they throw something out just to get the tradition going.
And you've gotten
absolutely
expert at getting those comments out a split second before I hit the unmute button. So
it's funny because Critical Role for a long time did the same thing. They throw out just raunchy ass things right before the show goes live to try and break Matt in his intro, and like nothing to do with that. It's just apparently this is a thing that D&D players are going to go live.
Like doing stage in high school and in college, that's just a thing in theater in general, is to try to break your co-stars in such a way that you're not breaking character, that you're getting your lines and your cues, but you're going to say something or make a face whenever the audience can't quite see it, and see if it's going to break them.
And
it's a game.
And I know we've done it here in our own game, but I don't know, Dan and Ted, what your experience with this is, but M and Jeremy and I sort of all came up together and met through playing in these older groups, the what we know as the OSG and the Brigade and Absolute Tabletop, where we've always played in Google Hangouts or some kind of online game that had a side chat. And it's just been tradition that while the most intense character-driven roleplay is happening, the most ridiculous, raunchiest jokes are happening in the side chat. And sometimes you have no idea, but the goal is during those intense scenes is to break whoever's in the scene. And you guys have done it to me a few times in the side chat. It's why I don't look at the side chat that often while we're playing, while I'm DMing, because I'll glance over and I'll see something and I wish I didn't.
Jake, I think the one shot group is where I met you.
Yeah, actually I think so. Yeah, so yeah, that was interesting because we met through that, and then you invited me to play in the Nerdarchy games.
Yeah, you had been in a handful of things, and I'm like, all right, this works.
I had been playing for quite a while in those, and you and I had sort of developed a friendship from that. And you and I often after the games would talk, and you would talk about how you're basically a forever DM and you really want to play in a long-term campaign. And that's when we were sort of coming in on the end of season 1. And I kind of said, hey, actually, I didn't say anything. I just kind of talked to M and Jeremy and the others, V and at the time DM Scotty, and said, how would you feel about bringing Ted in for this? And that's how that came about, that Ted joined us for the Forge of Fury and has been with us now for a couple of years, most of the 3 years that we've been playing.
And I'll extra share here. I found it so almost kind of like ridiculous and amusing. Like I was so attached to the Path of the Ancients barbarian. I'm like, I've got this awesome concept and I'm going to do this thing. And it's like, oh yeah, we already got one of them. And I'm like, what?
We have a dwarf Path of the Ancients barbarian already. But continuing into our new season, Thorgarn is continuing to be the extra dwarf. We'll touch on that
again.
We'll touch on that in a moment, because we've got one more question from the audience, and then I want to start to shift into looking ahead just for a little bit. We've got about maybe 20-25 minutes before we want to wrap things up. But from Cole Sparks in the chat, how much, Dan, of your day job information affects Drown's choices? Do you play test other things with him? And knowing Rhyme as well as you do, did that suggest things? I think, how much does your day job affect the way you play your character and the material that we're playing through?
Right. So I'm pretty selective when I use playtest material in games that I'm playing, and never when I'm running. If I'm running a home game or whatever, I don't really use Unearthed Arcana material, because there's already so many versions of things spinning around in my head that sometimes I don't know what's the published version or not, which, by the way, is why I look things up constantly. Like, D&D's rules are my job. I don't trust my memory to remember how the sleep spell works off the top of my head. I look it up pretty much every time. And I recommend you do too if you have the second to spare, because we forget stuff. Our memories are fallible. We fill in the gaps. We overwrite things. It's terrible. As far as Drown, you're never going to see secrets like snuck into Drown's build or choices or anything like that. I'll never touch anything that hasn't been put out for public consumption, at least in an Unearthed Arcana. And I think if I were invited to join the game permanently first, I wouldn't have played a Lurker in the Deep Warlock. Again, this was an artifact of him being a one-shot character.
Right.
So as far as how well I know Rhyme, it didn't really come into play all that much, because I knew that Jake was going to have to change the hell out of things just to accommodate our higher level. So like I knew what was going on in the Black Cabin, right? When we were messing around with that Sun Orb thing. I knew who Oyun Minartok was, that sort of stuff. I didn't know what was going on in our first fight with Auril, because Jake ramped her up through the roof because he had to, because otherwise we would have shit-canned her round one. So it really hasn't been an issue.
So can I throw something in on there?
Yeah.
There's lots of times that, people are aware of what's going on and what have you. I mean, there's times that even for Nerdarchy videos, we'll talk about pieces of books and that kind of stuff. And if I know that we're running something, I try to be very careful about, what am I touching on? What am I looking at? So I avoided a lot of the Rhyme content, and I've only loosely glossed through, the adventure stuff for Wild Beyond the Witchlight, because I don't want to spoil what's going on in the game. But Dave, my business partner at Nerdarchy, he likes to do things the fun way, as he would call it. If something's up, you can either do something and really screw up and use it to your advantage, You can ignore it, the safe thing to do, or you can really have some fun with it and be like, oh, I'm going to go in the other direction. I'm going to touch the thing I'm not supposed to. I'm going to use the thing that's going to cause more problems because, like, oh, I'm going to use fire on brown mold or, that kind of stuff. Like, you can do those kinds of things when you already know because you're adding to the story, not just making things easier.
And I see Cole Sparks had a quick follow-up and he said, ooh, this new shiny thing, can I include it in my character, not metagaming? Yeah. I know what you meant. I maybe didn't express that very well. No, if anything is not like out in public, I don't use it for Drown. If something comes out like in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, if there are new invocations or something in there, then those are fair game and I'll use them. But I won't use anything for Drown, any mechanical element or trick or player option that isn't publicly available.
One of the things I really liked about where your knowledge of something came in is more on the meta level, because I think you shared this off stream, but there was a scene early in very early in the season where the Dawnbringers fought an ice troll. And afterwards you told us that was basically the first thing you worked on when you got there. I find that kind of stuff. That's like IMDb watching a TV show and looking at the trivia and going, oh, this was the first thing Dan worked on at WotC. Cool.
Yeah, it was the first assignment I was given on Rime of the Frost Maiden was, hey, come up with some ideas for what happens when you cut out an ice troll's heart and what you can do with it. So
yeah, so I love that kind of stuff about it. All right, so with the little bit of time that we have, we don't have a hard stop, but I've kind of told everybody here we're going to be going. Basically, we're shooting for around at this point about 10:45-ish, but let's take a look at what's next for the Dawnbringers. So we've already announced season 6 will be starting in January, and it's going to be The Wild Beyond the Witchlight. I've mentioned it's going to be very heavily modified to fit with our story, with a major story element that's leading us into this is the fact that you learned as Dawnbringers, major spoiler alerts, if you haven't been watching or haven't seen the last bits of this last season, is you learned that the Evangeline, which is sort of a meta item, I run Liberation of the Evangeline charity games for the Talon and Claw Sea of Thieves crew. I've used it, created it in my home game. It's actually, it's kind of tangled up with something or I'd pull it down. But it's actually a physical ship that I built out of foam and cardboard like 5 years ago, and gave it the name. And I've created this mythological lore around it, that it's this magical ship that can fly. It can instantly move up to 10 days worth of travel, but it takes every day that you use takes 3 days to regenerate. So if you use 10 days of travel, it takes 30 days before you can use it again. There's hidden weaponry on it, including a Beholder's Disintegration Eye Stalk, all kinds of stuff like that. They recently, in a charity game, found a hidden lever that was never there before that shot them up into space, where they encountered the Id Ascendant Nautiloid up there and got sent on a little quest. But I only recently, in conspiring with my son Zach, who is my number one person that he and I bounce ideas off of all the time, I came up with the idea about a year ago. Well, it was during Heart of the Nightfang Spire, where I said, what if the Evangeline is sentient? I had never explored that before. And then I thought, what if when the ship was broken apart, it somehow released this sentient being, their spirit, and they're a creature from the Feywild. And you had hints of that. If you remember, when you went to the Feywild, the entity, you met the satyr, but then there was that entity that you met that was named the Matron Eve the Angeline. And somebody, I think, made a comment that I think we're seeing the personification of the Evangeline. That was sort of an early seed of that. And so when Wild Beyond the Witchlight became a thing, and I realized, hey, I think this would work for our next season, was the Evangeline, she has the magic to send the crew to save them, send them into the Feywild, and that's going to create a hook for the next season. Still carrying over what's been going on for about 3 seasons with the Evangeline and the crew of the Evangeline, and creating this even deeper connection. So that's where you're going to see, if anybody has a familiarity with what the Wild Beyond the Witchlight is, you might see some deviation points, but I intend to make the story very much our own. I don't want to say my own. It's our own. I know how things are going to start. I don't know how they're going to go. It's the Dawnbringers. I mean, look at who I'm playing with. And you're only seeing a fraction of our normal group here. These are 6 very different wild individuals to play games with, and who knows what direction these are going to go. But each of you've leveled up to 14. You've made choices with a lot of, at 14, a lot of major features come available. What are you? Let's go around and if there's questions from the audience, again, continue with that, and we'll try to get to them if we can. But we're going to go around in reverse order as I'm seeing you on my screen. So I'm going to start with you, Jeremy. What are you as a player and as Talmud looking at as we go into season 6? What are you anticipating? What are you hoping for? Part of this is me as the DM who's going, okay, I want to see what my players want. But also just, I'm curious and letting our audience know, what do you think? What are you looking forward to?
So I want to preface my answer with just the fact that I'm not typically familiar with a lot of the published adventure settings that WotC puts out. I know them from being adjacent to them for playing the game for so long, but when I've run games, ever since I began running games, I've always done so with homebrewed content, just because I didn't have access to a lot of the setting material. And then I had already established the worlds that I liked to run. So then I just kept doing that instead of diving into modules. So I know of the Feywild, but I've never really delved into it before. But like I adore A Midsummer Night's Dream and all of the old Fey stories of Oberon and Titania and all of that kind of stuff. And I know that the Feywild incorporates some of those principles, those kinds of aesthetics. So I'm really excited to explore that. The eternal grace, the kind of casual use of magic, all of that kind of stuff is very fascinating. The oneness with nature. And I'm really excited though, because I'm playing Talmud, who is kind of the antithesis to everything that the Feywild represents. And I know for a fact that I'm going to get all of us in so much fucking trouble, and I can't wait.
To follow up on that, Jake, if you haven't seen it, there's a notation in Wild Beyond the Witchlight that points you to the Domains of Delight product that's on the DM's Guild. If you haven't, pick it up.
Yep.
I will say that purchasing Domains of Delight supports a charity. So
yes, it's Extra Life again.
Domains of Delight's it's an Extra Life product. Yeah.
Yes, so I have picked up every one of those when they've become available.
And that's content that's created by the D&D studio, the design team. That's all. That is, official book.
I actually, because I had a preview copy, the second I read that note, I went to DM's Guild and I'm like, oh wait, it hasn't released yet, so it's not here.
I wound up doing the same thing as well.
Ted, what about you and Thorgarn?
So I'm on the same cusp of things for Jeremy. I've played around a little bit in the Feywild. The last game that I ran, we kind of danced on the edges of the Feywild, but the characters really didn't go too heavy into the Fey angle of things. So I'm really looking forward to the whimsy, as opposed to like the hard, obnoxious, cold elements that we've been facing. Like, we're going to be up against things that are going to try us emotionally as much as physically. And I know that you are an excellent GM, and you are going to try the patience of these two dwarves to no end.
Ooh,
and as much as Ted is going to enjoy it, I think Thorgarn is going to have some serious problems.
What about M and Fig?
I'm really excited for Feywild because I just love anything weird and whimsical and trickery. But in terms of like characters, I am very excited to see the what has been kind of hinted at with Thorgarn and Archimedes, and like that whole scene with Fig and Thorgarn like almost hitting Fig with the sword and all of that. I really want to see where that goes. So that's very exciting.
I guess the old expression works. Only time will tell.
What about Dan and Drown?
So one of the things I'm most looking forward to is the fact that the Feywild is, in addition to being like the home and genesis of most Fey creatures, it's a place of pure, unfettered, ramped to 11 emotion. That's its essence. That's what it is. It reacts to your emotional state. You can, and that's why Archfey are so powerful, is that they can warp the area around them to the kind of emotional tenor that they want. And everyone does a little bit, right? Drown is very specifically kind of void of emotions. So this is going to be interesting and very confusing for him. That's like, I mean, you're taking someone who just doesn't have the capacity to connect with emotions into a place that is made of it, just literally made of it. So is that going? I haven't decided how that's really going to.
Don't worry, I have.
Yet. Oh, perfect. Because it could bleed in and make him feel this shit that he's not equipped to really deal with. And what the hell is that going to look like? He could just be like a gray blotch in the middle of this riot of color, and
Remember when Data on the Next Generation had an emotion chip put in, and it went haywire? That's one possible thing I see.
That is very much a possible way. Yes.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things. Yeah, a realm that its essence is emotion, and we're going to throw a raging barbarian or two in there. The other thing, because we really haven't talked a lot about Cantriel, because unfortunately V couldn't be with us tonight, but it's been mentioned about, I think Cantriel herself has mentioned it, that Cantriel is Eladrin, and Cantriel originates in the Feywild, and has mentioned that to at least one person. But so that's going to have some interesting effects for Cantriel to have a homecoming of sorts. As I've said many times, I'm highly customizing this setting. I'm using it sort of as the playground by which to sort of tell our own story, and customizing it because of the level of the tiers of everybody. Tears in the crying sense, in the emotional sense, but the tier that we're playing at, we're coming in at level 14. There's elements that I'm really looking forward to. So from a meta perspective, one of the things I think is really neat about the module outside of Dawnbringers if you're into modules, I highly recommend checking out The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, because it's such a one, it's an incredibly unique setting. Two, it is it's sort of this at the vanguard of some of the new direction that I'm hoping we'll see more of in these products. But one of the things I know it's been touted for is its accessibility for new DMs and players. And it is, the way it is presented, it's entirely possible to play the written adventure module without ever fighting anything. It's designed to be, sure, you have your stat blocks and your encounters and things, and yeah, you can go in there, swords of swing and whatever, but you could play the entire adventure module never getting into a fight. Which I think is fascinating.
Let me just go ahead and spoil this for everyone. We will not do that.
Oh, yeah.
Can do that.
It is guaranteed.
That is not happening here.
It is guaranteed that that's not going to happen. But I think I'm really looking forward to, as I mentioned early in the stream, I have a surprise planned for the players and the audience that will be revealed at some point in the first episode, that is going to dramatically affect every one of the characters. And I think it's going to be incredibly fun to see how everybody reacts to that and deals with it, and how it affects the game. And I'm really looking forward to telling this story. I think it's, the adventure itself is very interesting, and I'm looking forward to the challenge of modifying it to fit the Dawnbringers narrative. And I'm just looking forward to another season of Dawnbringers. We've been playing for 3 years. M, V, and Jeremy have been here since the beginning. DM Scotty was a big part for a long time. And then had to could no longer play because work scheduling and everything else. We've had guests like Kelly come in for an episode that affected her appearance affected the entire season. And we've had Zach has come in. M's had to leave for periods of time. We were able to bring Ted in the second season, to bring Dan in the third season. We brought Katie in partway through this season to fill in as a summer fill-in. We adored playing with Katie and Rolo so much, we invited her to stay on. So going into season 6 is going to be everybody you see here plus V and Katie. I absolutely adore these 6 humans. These are some of my favorite people in the world, and I look forward to whenever we can get together. Those of you in the audience don't know this, but sometimes when we've had scheduling interrupt, things get in the way and we can't play. Those of us that are able to, we still get together sometimes and just hang out for a little bit, just to check in on everybody. We're constantly checking in, and we look forward to playing this game every week and having a blast doing it. I know I do. And being able to share it with the audience. I think we have an absolutely incredible audience. It was this campaign. It was in the first season, and it was, I don't know if you're still here, Jose. Joey P was actually the impetus for Domain Dice. But the generosity of our audience, wanting to just support the stream, that we said we want to have a way to have these mean something. I came up with the concept of Domain Dice, ran it by the players, and we all agreed to it. And we agreed to this level, this heroic level of the way the campaign is going, and I wouldn't have it any other way. This entire campaign so far has been one of those things that I have never once viewed this as, this is my game. This is my story. I'm running you through my adventures. These are the tales. We've given you countless examples during this show tonight of ways that we're cooperatively telling stories. And that's my favorite thing about Dungeons and Dragons. Role playing as a whole, but for me personally, it always comes to Dungeons and Dragons. I have familiarity with it. It's such an easy system and fun system to just pick up and teach other people, and you get to meet awesome people and play games with them and play pretend and escape from the just wild things that are going on in the real world. And I gesture wildly at the last 2 years, vaguely at the last 2 years. But I have absolutely loved every moment of our games together, and I look forward to continuing to play. And I hope that when we reach the end game of this campaign, that we can roll up level 1 characters and do it all over again. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. As we get ready to end here, I would just like to throw it back to each of you. Any final thoughts for those of us at the table here or the audience or anything? And we'll start with you, Dan. Parting words for the year, I guess. This is the last time we'll be together until January.
Yeah, damn. Really just that this season of Dawnbringers has been different in a lot of ways, and in just so many good ones. And I'm really thrilled and thankful that I got to be part of this. So once again, thanks for inviting me to play with y'all. This is great.
Yeah, this is a wonderful campaign, and I am so grateful and happy that even when I've had to miss for some months, that I'm always welcome back. That is amazing and awesome. And just very grateful because this campaign is really awesome. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Before we go to you, Ted, I'm just going to take a moment to probably unintentionally embarrass Em, or at least shine the spotlight on you. Em and I have been friends for 4.5 years. I think we met in 2017 at AtCon in Seattle, Tacoma, in 2017. And since then, I think I have played in more games with Em than any other person. Em has been in almost every campaign and mini campaign that I've run. I've played in numerous games that Em has run. And the only reason I haven't played in more is because I'm running a bunch. We play in our Mythos Investigators over on Big Bearded Nerd, and I've been on Dice on Ice many times. And I've just, Em and I just, I think because of that, we just really know how to play off of each other and the kind of characters that we like to play. I play in, for what, 2.5 years, something like that. We've been playing Curse of Strahd, or is it 3 years? Did we say 3 years for Curse of Strahd?
3 years in January.
We've been playing that as a bi-weekly campaign. We're getting really close to 50 episodes of that. So yeah, Em and I have played a lot of games together. And it's just been a blast. I just wanted to say that. So of course you're always welcome. And maybe I haven't played in as many games with everybody else, but of course my table is always open to everybody. Ted.
So I want to touch back on what you were saying about, in our off weeks, we even, touch base and hang out for a little bit. I think, my takeaway moment is going to be, if you're gaming, whether it's online or in person, I think it's important to always, check in and to treat the people that you're role playing with as your friends, as your family. You're not going to have the fantastic games at the table, if you can't connect emotionally outside of the table as well, for the longest time, I've said that, this is my Thursday family, and I care so much about all of them. I'm thrilled to be a part of this game. And honestly, with all of the craziness and the things that we've done, this has done wonders for my mental health. The emotional roller coaster, the laughs, the fact that, the constant reminder of, hey, here's people that do care about you. As we're getting into a family holiday here in the States next week, like, this is a family, and I think you should be treating your tables as such.
Jeremy.
So I've played Dungeons and Dragons for a really long time, since I was about 14. So it's about 27 years, give or take. And I've run a home game in a weekly playing home group for about 21 years now. And they are some of the best friends that I've ever made in my entire life. Many of them I've known since they were 14. And we play, almost on a weekly basis with each other. And those people mean everything to me in my life. And this is the only group that I've ever played with that comes anywhere near that kind of camaraderie. And that's been baking for 21 years. This has been baking for a scant, I say that, jokingly, a scant 3 years. But I feel very, very fortunate to have been invited to be a part of this game. When I came to play, I had been watching V and DM Scotty on YouTube for probably at least a year or so at that point, if not longer. And when Jake asked me to be a part of the game, I think I even asked him, "Are you sure?" Because it seemed like a massive juxtaposition in my mind. And so I was nervous when I sat down to play, but that all very quickly went away once I got to know everybody and actually play alongside you. And it's been incredible. I've loved getting to sit down and play every week and joke around and be silly and dirty, and to share our love of geeky shit with one another, as well as to kind of get to know this character that I've played. Talmud has been a really fun character, both mechanically and from a role-playing sense. He's been a ton of fun to explore over the last 3.5 years or so. And I'm really excited to see what's kind of still ahead of us, what Talmud might discover about himself, or what I might, figure out about him as we continue on, and what we're going to find out about the other characters and kind of the kinds of interactions we're going to have. I'm very much looking forward to it. And then Jake, I've known you for a long time, and I've gotten the chance to play with you on a lot of occasions, and I feel very fortunate for that. You're a dungeon master who brings a lot to the table. Every time that you sit down, whether you actually do prep notes or not, you're prepared. And it shows, and you bring a lot of work and a lot of thought and a lot of love into the games that you run. And that makes it very easy for me as a player to invest a lot up front, which inevitably in the end pays out in dividends. So I thank you for that, for kind of setting that stage to allow that to be possible. And yeah, last but certainly not least, the audience for this game has been just, you guys blow me away. The amount of generosity and how much money that you guys will throw at us. It's so humbling, honestly, and very, very endearing. And getting the chance to kind of
we'd repay them poorly if we didn't super crit the shit out of everything we fight, right?
Exactly. I'm glad to spend your money to make my character look amazing. No, it's a fantastic relationship. Getting to talk to a lot of you week after week, and getting to know a lot of you and game with a lot of you in games that I've run, or the games that you have run that I've been invited to be a part of. It's been incredible, especially throughout COVID and the pandemic and quarantine. Like, I don't think that if I had this to come to every week, I don't know what would have happened to my sanity, honestly. So yeah, from the bottom of my heart, thank all of you very much. I love you all. And I hope that you have a very safe and a good, relaxing holiday season, whatever degree that you're celebrating. I hope that it goes well.
Yeah, Jeremy and I have actually known each other through the online gaming community probably for about 5 years or so. We just haven't had the opportunity to play in as many games as we would have liked, often because of the schedule. But Jeremy is also somebody who I kind of met you through the crafting space as well. But somebody who I've always pointed at as just an incredible immersive storyteller. I mentioned it earlier, one of the most immersive games I've ever played in was our Momentum campaign with Austin and Jeff Doty and Lloyd. And I feel like I'm forgetting somebody. Alan came in. Dave was a part of it for a while. Just such an amazing, I mean, we literally had a 90-minute section where all of us were yelling at each other because my character almost killed everybody. And Jeremy just sat back like this. So Jeremy's games are a masterclass in high prep, high intrigue games. I highly recommend you follow them. And I have not had the fortune of playing in a Dan game yet, but I get to play tomorrow, actually, in a Ted game. I've actually been playing in monthly games with Ted for, like 5 years, 4 years?
It's been at least 4 years. I stopped keeping track a long time ago.
It's just we've had a mostly pretty much the same crew the whole time with Asa, Frag.
I think the first year was very flip-floppy as to, who did it. And then as it kind of became a more structured, let's turn this into a campaign, we felt it was, worthwhile to actually put together a group. And then after, you invited me into this, there was discussion, and we brought V in as a fifth player. And, V has done a marvelous job with all of her amazing character voices, accents, and amazing role-playing abilities. It's a pretty fun cast. I enjoy that game, and though sadly V will not be with us tomorrow, I think it's going to be a lot of fun tomorrow evening. I got some pieces of the puzzle that I'm still putting together, but we ended on a cliffhanger last time, so we'll see how that actually winds up pairing off and finishing off when we show up tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over on Nerdarchy Live.
Looking forward to it. And I just put the link in the chat. It's actually from Jasper's Game Week 2020, Day 5, Game 4. That we played in the Alt Universe Dawnbringers Riverboat game. And
I brought that up because that's something I said in chat, but maybe anybody here didn't hear it. That sort of Riverboat Captain version of Drown, that was a what if he hadn't had his essence ripped away from him.
And I just realized in looking for that one that I don't think I ever posted our Orphan Makers game, which was sort of a mid-season filler game where we actually played we played in Wildmount. It was right around the time Wildmount came out. It was a one-shot where the Dawnbringers were the Orphan Makers, and that was the introduction of the 3 dragon aunties, the 3 dragonborn hags that had the Horizon back turtle with their house on it, who have made appearances in other games of mine since. Cole mentioned in chat that the Dawnbringers Riverboat game was her first ever MTD game. That's where Cole became aware of MTD and joined our community and has since become a wonderful friend. and she is going to be playing in my charity game on Monday, The Misfits of the Multiverse on Big Bearded Nerd. That is a charity game raising money for Planned Parenthood. So please do stop by. Cole, you have mod powers. If you want to link where you're going to be playing Westocalypse, feel free to drop that link tomorrow night, later in the evening. I think they actually don't even start until we're done with our game, Ted. But the Westocalypse game will also be fundraising for that as well. So please do check that out. As I mentioned earlier, much to some of your dismay, this is the last time you will see the Dawnbringers live until January of 2022 when we return for Season 6, Wild Beyond the Witchlight. MTD is going to be taking primarily a hiatus. I know Big Bearded Nerd is also taking a hiatus. We're going to be running some live premieres on Monday nights for the Scribes and Scrolls, these one-on-one interludes, and I have a couple games that I'm playing in Mythos and Curse of Strahd and a couple of those. But otherwise, we will be using the time to recharge and refresh, and I have a whole hell of a lot of planning to do for Season 6. That I'm very much looking forward to. So thank you everybody. Thank you everybody who tuned in with us, and for your, as Jeremy mentioned, for your incredible generosity and support of the stream and the Dawnbringers. We greatly appreciate that. Those of you that like to lurk silently in the chat, we just want to remind you that we appreciate you all the same. I hope you're enjoying everything here. And though they couldn't be with us, we are very appreciative of V and Goblin Katie's contributions as well. They are equally big parts of the Dawnbringers. And as always, I have to thank these amazing humans that I get to play this game with every week. A huge thank you to Dan, M, Ted, and Jeremy, without whom it would just be me talking to myself for a couple hours each week. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to end this stream. We're going to end it the same way we end every stream. And you can say it with me if you want.
Hey, stop touching me there.